February 15th, 1942, 17:15 hours, Singapore. Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, 58 years old, commanding British forces in Singapore, walks down Bukit Timah Road carrying a white flag. Behind him, two staff officers, also carrying white flags. Ahead, Japanese forward positions, where General Tomoyuki Yamashita is waiting. Percival is walking to surrender, not a small garrison, not an isolated outpost, but Singapore, Britain's most important military base in Asia, the fortress that was supposed to be impregnable, defended by 80,000 troops. Percival is surrendering to a Japanese force of 36,000, a larger garrison surrendering to a smaller attacking force. It's the largest capitulation in British military history, and it will shock the world. 3 months ago, Singapore seemed invincible. The British called it the Gibraltar of the East, a fortress on an island, protected by naval guns, defended by modern aircraft, garrisoned by tens of thousands of troops. British propaganda claimed Singapore could withstand a year-long siege. Winston Churchill declared Singapore impregnable. Military strategists believed Japan wouldn't dare attack it. They were wrong about everything. Japan attacked December 8, 1941, one day after Pearl Harbor. Within 70 days, Japanese forces advanced 650 miles down the Malayan Peninsula, defeated every British defensive position, and reached Singapore's doorstep. Within 7 more days, Singapore fell. Churchill would later write, "In all my life, I have never received a more direct shock. The fall of Singapore was the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history. How did this happen? How did 36,000 Japanese troops defeat 80,000 British Empire troops in 1 week? The answer involves strategic miscalculation, tactical incompetence, and a Japanese general who bluffed his way to victory with an army that was nearly out of ammunition. The Gibraltar of the East. To understand Singapore's fall, we need to understand why Britain thought it was invincible. Singapore, an island at the southern tip of the Malayan Peninsula, was Britain's primary naval base in Asia. Strategic importance, controls access to Malacca Strait, major shipping route between Indian Ocean and Pacific defends British interests in Malaya, rubber and tin production. Projects British naval power throughout Asia-Pacific, protects Australia and New Zealand from Japanese expansion. Britain spent 20 years and £60 million fortifying Singapore, building it into what they believed was an impregnable fortress. The fortifications, coastal artillery, 15-inch naval guns positioned to defend against naval attack from the south, ocean approach. Airfields, multiple airfields to base RAF fighters and bombers naval base. Massive shipyard, capable of servicing entire British Eastern Fleet garrison. 80,000 troops, British, Australian, Indian, defending island, but Singapore's defenses had a fatal flaw. They faced the wrong direction. All heavy artillery, the 15-inch guns that could sink battleships, pointed south toward the ocean. British planners assumed Japan would attack Singapore from the sea, a naval invasion crossing the South China Sea. But Japan didn't attack from the south. Japan attacked from the north, down the Malayan Peninsula. And Singapore's northern defenses, facing the narrow Johor Strait separating Singapore from the mainland, were minimal. No heavy artillery covering northern approaches, no fortifications preventing land invasion, no plans for defending against attack from the north. British planners dismissed the possibility of land attack from the north because they believed the Malayan jungle was impassable. 600 miles of dense tropical jungle. British strategists assumed modern armies couldn't advance through it. One British general famously said, "The jungle is impenetrable. Tanks can't operate in jungle. Supplies can't be transported through jungle. Japan would be foolish to try." Japan tried and succeeded. The Japanese Blitzkrieg, December 8, 1941. Japanese invasion of Malaya begins. The Japanese plan, designed by General Tomoyuki Yamashita, was audacious. Land 36,000 troops on Malaya's northeast coast, advance 650 miles south through supposedly impassable jungle. Capture Singapore in 100 days. British forces defending Malaya, 88,000 troops, including Singapore garrison. The numbers favored Britain, larger force defending prepared positions against smaller attacking force. But Japan had advantages British didn't anticipate. Advantage 1. Air superiority. Japan's first strikes destroyed most RAF aircraft on the ground. Within days, Japan controlled the air. British forces moved without air cover. Advantage 2. Jungle warfare training. Japanese troops trained specifically for jungle combat. Light equipment, rapid movement, infiltration tactics. British troops trained for European-style warfare. Heavy equipment, fixed positions, conventional tactics. Advantage 3. Bicycles. Japanese troops used thousands of bicycles, allowing rapid movement down Malayan roads. British expected slow advance through jungle. Instead, Japanese advanced 15 to 20 miles per day on roads, faster than British could retreat. Advantage 4. Amphibious flanking. Japanese used small boats and amphibious landings to bypass British defensive positions. British established roadblock. Japanese landed troops behind it. British retreated to next defensive position, Japanese already flanking it. Advantage 5. Psychological warfare. Japanese attacked aggressively, loudly, creating impression of overwhelming force. They used bugles, shouting, infiltration at night, creating panic among British and Indian troops. Many British units retreated before being decisively engaged, fearing encirclement. December 8th, January 31st, 55 days. Japanese advanced 650 miles from landing beaches to Johor Strait, the narrow waterway separating Malaya from Singapore Island. British forces retreat repeatedly, each defensive position abandoned after brief fighting. British casualties: 5,000 killed, 15,000 wounded. Japanese casualties: 1,800 killed, 3,000 wounded. More damaging than casualties, British morale collapsed. Troops that had never lost before were retreating constantly. Indian units, poorly trained, led by British officers who often didn't speak their languages, began deserting. Australian units, frustrated by repeated retreats, lost confidence in British command. By January 31st, the entire British force in Malaya has retreated to Singapore Island. The Japanese are across Johor Strait, less than 1 mile of water separating them from Singapore. The siege of Singapore is about to begin. The Causeway Crossing, January 31st, 1942. British forces complete withdrawal to Singapore Island. The Johor Causeway, a 1-mile-long roadway connecting Malaya to Singapore, is partially destroyed by British engineers. A 70-foot gap is blown in the causeway. British commanders believe this will delay Japanese crossing for days or weeks. They're wrong. February 8, 1942. Japanese attack begins. General Yamashita orders assault across Johor Strait, targeting Singapore's northwest coast. The crossing plan? Phase 1. Artillery bombardment. Japanese artillery shells. British positions. Phase 2. Infantry assault. Japanese troops cross strait in small boats, landing on Singapore's northwest beaches. Phase 3. Establish beachhead, expand landing zones, bring reinforcements. British defenders, Australian 22nd Brigade, approximately 3,000 troops defending 10 miles of coastline. That's 300 troops per mile, far below the density needed for effective defense. British commanders place most troops defending south and east coasts, still expecting Japanese naval attack from that direction. The northwest coast, where Japanese actually attack, is weakly defended. 22 to 30 hours, February 8th, Japanese artillery bombardment begins. For 1 hour, Japanese guns fire on Australian positions. Then at 2330 hours, first wave of Japanese infantry crosses strait in assault boats. Australian defenders open fire, machine guns, mortars, rifles. Some Japanese boats are hit, troops killed or drowned, but most boats reach shore. Japanese troops establish beachhead, expanding rapidly. Australian units counterattack, hand-to-hand fighting in darkness, confusion. Some Australian positions are overrun, others hold. By dawn, February 9th, Japanese have 10,000 troops ashore. Australian defenders, outnumbered, outflanked, begin retreating towards Singapore City. British command expected Japanese crossing to take days. Instead, it took 1 night. General Percival, commanding British forces, now faces crisis. Japanese control northwestern Singapore. Australian units retreating, no effective defensive line established. Water supplies threatened. Japanese. Advancing toward reservoirs. Percival orders withdrawal to perimeter around Singapore City, abandoning most of island, defending only urban center. This retreat demoralizes remaining defenders. They're giving up ground without fighting for it. 7 days of collapse. February 9th of 15, 7 days. Japanese forces advance across Singapore Island, moving from northwestern landing zones towards Singapore City. British forces retreat, establishing new defensive positions, then abandoning them as Japanese approach. The retreat is chaotic. Units lose contact with headquarters. Officers don't know where their troops are. Troops don't know where they're supposed to retreat to. Supplies abandoned. Ammunition, food, medical equipment left behind. February 10th, 11. Japanese capture water reservoirs. Singapore's water supply, dependent on reservoirs on northern part of island, is now in Japanese hands. Percival's chief engineer reports, "We have water for 48 hours maximum. After that, 1 million civilians and 80,000 troops will have no water. This is catastrophic. Singapore can't hold out without water." February 12th. Japanese artillery begins shelling Singapore City. Civilian casualties mount, hundreds killed daily. Panic spreads. Civilians flee toward docks, attempting to evacuate. British colonial administration collapses. Civilian government loses control. February 13th. Percival holds conference with senior commanders. Options discussed. Option 1, counterattack. Attempt to push Japanese back, recapture reservoirs. Senior commanders report, troops demoralized, many units combat ineffective, counterattack likely to fail. Option 2, continue defending, hold urban center until reinforcements arrive. Chief engineer reports, no water, disease will spread within days, defending without water is impossible. Option 3, surrender. Percival resists surrender. Churchill's orders are, no surrender, hold Singapore to the last man. But Percival's commanders unanimously report, continued resistance is futile. Surrendering will save civilian lives and prevent massacre when Japanese overrun remaining defenses. February 14th. Yamashita sends ultimatum. Surrender immediately or I will order attack on city center. Many civilians will die. Percival cables Churchill. Situation desperate, no water. Troops demoralized. Request permission to surrender. Churchill responds, you must continue to fight. Honor of British Empire at stake. But Percival recognizes continued fighting will only result in massacre of civilians and troops without changing outcome. February 15th, morning. Percival holds final conference. Decision, surrender. He drafts surrender message to Yamashita. Will meet to discuss cessation of hostilities. At 17:15 hours, Percival walks under white flag to Japanese headquarters. The surrender, February 15th, 1942. 17:15 hours. Ford Motor Factory, Bukit Timah. Percival enters the room where Yamashita is waiting. The room, a factory administrative office, is sparse. Yamashita sits at a table. Percival and his staff stand. Yamashita speaks through interpreter. Will you surrender? Percival attempts to negotiate terms. I request assurances that... Yamashita interrupts. Yes or no, will you surrender? Percival hesitates. Yamashita shouts, yes or no. This is theater. Yamashita is bluffing. Japanese forces are nearly out of ammunition. They've been fighting for 70 days. Supply lines stretched 650 miles. If Percival says no and continues fighting, Yamashita's forces might run out of ammunition within 24-48 hours. But Percival doesn't know this. He believes Japanese have unlimited supplies and overwhelming force. Percival says, yes, I surrender. Yamashita hands Percival's surrender document. Unconditional surrender of all British forces in Singapore. Percival signs. At 20:30 hours, the surrender is broadcast. 80,000 British Empire troops lay down their arms. It's the largest capitulation in British military history. Surrender terms. All Allied troops become prisoners of war. Japanese occupy Singapore immediately. Civilians remain under Japanese military administration. The prisoners' fate will be brutal. Many will die in Japanese POW camps, worked to death building Burma Railway. Others will die from disease, starvation, abuse. Of 80,000 captured, approximately 27,000 will die before war ends. Churchill, receiving news in London, is devastated. He writes in his memoirs, "I felt physically sick. The fall of Singapore was one of the worst disasters in British history. I did not anticipate such a complete collapse. British prestige in Asia is shattered. Colonies throughout Asia, India, Burma, Malaya, see that Britain cannot defend them. The myth of European invincibility is broken. This will have lasting effects, accelerating independence movements throughout British Empire after war. Why Singapore fell. Military historians have analyzed Singapore's fall extensively. The question: how did 80,000 defenders lose to 36,000 attackers in 7 days? Multiple factors contributed. Factor 1: strategic miscalculation. Britain assumed Japan would attack from sea. All defenses faced wrong direction. When Japan attacked from land, north, Singapore had no effective northern defenses. Factor 2: air superiority. Japan destroyed RAF aircraft in first days. British forces fought without air cover. This allowed Japanese artillery and troops to move freely, while British movements were constantly observed and attacked. Factor 3: jungle warfare training. Japanese troops were trained for jungle combat. British troops were not. British tactics, designed for European warfare, failed in tropical jungle terrain. Factor 4: command failure. British commanders consistently underestimated Japanese capabilities. They retreated repeatedly rather than fighting defensive battles that might have stopped Japanese advance. Factor 5: morale collapse. British and Commonwealth troops lost confidence after repeated retreats. Indian units, poorly trained and led, deserted in large numbers. Australian units, frustrated by incompetent British command, lost faith in their leaders. Factor 6: water supply. Losing control of reservoirs made continued defense impossible. Singapore couldn't hold out without water. This forced surrender within days. Factor 7: Percival's leadership general. Percival was indecisive, defensive-minded, unable to inspire confidence. He never counterattacked aggressively. He allowed troops to retreat rather than holding critical positions. He surrendered when Japanese forces were nearly out of ammunition. If he had held 48 more hours, Japanese might have been forced to withdraw. Factor 8: Yamashita's bluff. Yamashita commanded smaller force with extended supply lines and low ammunition, but he attacked aggressively, creating impression of overwhelming strength. He demanded immediate surrender, not giving Percival time to realize Japanese were weak. Percival fell for the bluff. Post-war analysis: British military inquiry concluded, Singapore's fall resulted from strategic and tactical failures at every level. The defenses were inadequate. The command was incompetent. The troops were demoralized. The Japanese exploited every weakness. Churchill's assessment: Singapore should have held for months. It fell in days because we failed to defend it properly. Yamashita's assessment: post-war interview: I was afraid Percival would discover how weak we were. We were almost out of ammunition. If he had counterattacked strongly at any point, we might have failed. But he kept retreating. I couldn't believe my luck. Lieutenant General Percival survived the war, spent remainder as POW in Manchuria. After war, he was largely blamed for Singapore's fall. British government held inquiry. Percival's reputation never recovered. He retired from military, wrote memoirs defending his decisions, died 1902. He's remembered as the general who surrendered 80,000 troops, Britain's worst defeat. General Yamashita continued fighting, defending Philippines 1944-45. He was captured by Americans September 1945. He was tried for war crimes, atrocities committed by Japanese forces under his command in Philippines. He was convicted and hanged February 1946. His defense was, I didn't order atrocities. I couldn't control all troops under my command. The court rejected his defense, establishing command responsibility principle in international law. February 15, 1942. 7 days. 80,000 troops surrendered. The fortress that was supposed to be impregnable fell in 1 week. Singapore's fall shocked the world, proving that colonial empires built on perceived invincibility could collapse when that perception shattered. Britain built defenses facing the wrong direction. British commanders retreated rather than fought. British morale collapsed after repeated defeats, and a Japanese general bluffed his way to victory with an army nearly out of ammunition. Churchill called Singapore the worst disaster in British history. He was right. These stories of strategic failure, command incompetence, and the price of overconfidence deserve to be remembered. Subscribe so they never fade into history. Next time, one city, 872 days, 1.5 million dead, the siege that never broke, and the road across frozen water that saved Leningrad.